Good morning. My name is Chase Harrison, and I'll be leading the discussion today for our In the Spotlight series. I'm a senior partner here at Kingsley Partners. We are a global executive search firm, and I co-lead the firm's private equity practice. The Spotlight interview series, it features our global industry leaders discussing their vision of the marketplace, current challenges in the executive landscape in general. And today we're meeting with Giny Mullins. She is a partner with Linx Partners. She has over 20 years experience investing in and advising private middle market companies. Before she was with Linx, she was worked in M&A at Baird's investment banking division. She also has worked in the debt portfolio acquisition groups at Oryx and has a deep middle market background. She is one of three partners with Linx, which primarily invest in the middle market space in industrial businesses in manufacturing, and helps identify the best strategy to help take those businesses to the next level. I'm excited to speak with Giny, and we'll see where this conversation goes, but we'd love to get into multiple topics, including diversity, culture, and operations, and how they view, how she views private equity portfolio companies. Giny, thank you again for joining us. Maybe a good first question would be, obviously being in the human capital space, is, how do you evaluate human capital within your portfolio companies? Maybe, when you're looking at deals, what's one of the first couple of things you think about when we're looking at those types of businesses?
Sure, absolutely. Chase, thanks for having me. This is fun to do. So, when we're looking at a portfolio company, it starts from that first interaction and meeting, right? If the chemistry isn't right with a seller, with a management team that wants to sell and find a partner for us, then it's not going to be the right deal. So it all starts with the people making money, not just the products and services. So we focus on it right out of the gate. And then from there, when we're evaluating management teams, we spend a lot of time really focused on the entrepreneur, family-owned businesses. We're usually first institutional capital in the door. And those businesses, those CEOs and management teams are typically wearing what we say multiple hats, right? You've got a CEO who's also your chief operating officer, who's also the chief technology officer, and everybody's wearing so many hats in those entrepreneurial environments. And so for us, it's about evaluating the people that are there, but also, is there a self-awareness to know that in order to hit the next level of growth, they've got to augment their team. They've got to add people to it. They've got to take off some of those hats and be able to give some responsibilities to others within the organization. And so really at the evaluation level, it's about who's there, what is their desire to grow and build, what is their knowledge of knowing that they can't do everything, and then looking at what they've set up on the HR side for their people and how they are both compensating them as well as attracting them, training them, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because the more and more I see in how the landscape's changing in human capital, and especially from large companies and also into the middle market, is culture, right? And how businesses, I think about 10, 15 years ago, when I would speak to candidates, the first thing that would come out of my mouth would be, well, what's the EBITDA of the business? Tell me the drivers, et cetera. The typical questions you ask when you're recruiting someone and talking about a business. Now it's really, what's the culture like? Tell me about the team. What's the mood and the feel of the business? And I think some of the best types of people, best candidates, are thinking that way. And I think it's definitely been a shift, right? And maybe it's be interesting to hear, how you evaluate the culture of a business, because it's so important to be able to attract, quality candidates and quality people to those businesses.
Yeah, I think at the evaluation stage, when we're trying to partner with teams, again, it's usually pretty entrepreneurial what we're stepping into. And so what's important to us is that there is a culture of accountability, responsibility, fun, an ability to really want to hire the right people, grow the right people. Maybe typically they don't have all the bells and whistles in place, right? Often there aren't full job descriptions and career paths lined up in companies of the size that we partner with. But it's a culture where everybody within the organization is excited to come to work. They like what they do. There's a reason that they are there. The company has a reason to exist. And so for us at this stage, we're investing in companies that are kind of 4 to 10 million of EBITDA, so established businesses, but lower middle market. We just want to see the good bones there of a culture, right? I think cultures tend to evolve and change over time, and for us, when we're working with a portfolio after partnering with them, it's really all about how do we maintain some of that great entrepreneurial spirit, but then put some professionalization around it to support where the company wants to go for growth. But it's kind of an excitement that you should be able to feel up and down the organization. And you can get a good sense of walking the floors and talking to people what the culture of a business is. But I totally agree with you. I think candidates now, when we're augmenting management teams, it's a check the box that you've got the skills. We expect that you're going to find us the right candidates that have the skills, but then it's who's going to be able to fit into this culture and really adopt what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So the topic of the diversity and inclusion is obviously being so prevalent today. And obviously I see this a lot with larger businesses, but I do think it's filtering down into private equity and middle market. And I mean, I'm seeing some of my clients, even in the portfolio at the fund level, are hiring diversity and inclusion individuals just to look at their portfolio companies and how do we get more and more of those types of individuals involved. How do you work with your portfolio companies now to help create more of that, inclusive type workplace?
Yeah, the topic of ESG is not just for large public companies, right? It's also for the lower middle market. And so we really believe that it starts, and we're doing this with our portfolio companies now. It's a process. It's going to be a very long process for the life of the company, but we're starting with really an evaluation of what we have, right? Again, do we have job descriptions? Do we have career paths? And then really taking an assessment back with each of the management teams and saying, okay, can anyone come into our organization and start at any level of that organization and then progress over time based upon them getting the right skills, obviously, and growing? But is there anything that's impeding that career path from a diversity or inclusion focus, and that's really what we are trying to make sure of, is that anybody that comes into our organizations can grow and build over time. And if there are stumbling blocks, what are they and what do we do to address them? And that's kind of been the fun part right now. That's the part we're in with each of the portfolio companies is, do you see any of those impediments? And then, okay, what can we do about it? Because we're not going to change the mix of the workforce day one. Right. But ultimately, to get to diversity, I think it starts with, doing that self-evaluation and putting the pieces in place to make sure that there aren't any boulders that are going to keep people from progressing in their career based upon their race or background. If we do that today, we will ultimately get to more diverse, organizations, which is what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot. And I know it's not something that just happens overnight, right? You got to put the time, the effort in, and it's a slow trickle. And also, I know, listen, in the lower middle market, you're dealing with entrepreneurs. It's typically, family-owned businesses that maybe this is first time of level of professionalism, and it's things they haven't even thought about before, right? And how do you affect that change and talk to those types of individuals? To think about how they view it a little bit differently and how to really try and affect change. And obviously, as you know, it starts at the top. And, it's great that you guys at Linx are making that commitment right now.
Yeah, we absolutely believe it starts at the top, right? And you've got to, you're not going to change these organizations overnight. You're not going to change the makeup of, the workforce and the management teams overnight. But I think it all starts with sort of that self-assessment. What do we do? What do we want to do? What do we want to do better? And then what do we keep track of? How are we going to monitor success? How are we going to put achievable goals out there for these organizations that they can move aspirationally in the right direction? Again, it's about the 1% change that we can put in place. It's not going to be about, taking a lower middle market business and day one snapping our fingers and making it, fully ESG compliant in every way you would want a public company to be. It's really about a self-assessment, and then what can we do to be better for the company and be better for the community and the stakeholders at large.
Yeah, that's very insightful. Well, maybe take a second to tell me a little bit about. So I know you guys I know where you focus. Obviously, heavy in the lower middle market and industrial businesses. But when you look at potential partnerships with these businesses, if you were to look at company X versus company Y, like what are the things that make companies very attractive to your fund? I'm trying to get a view of how you evaluate companies, how you evaluate leadership, and not just leadership. I know we've already talked about that, but the actual business strategy and structure of those businesses.
Sure. So, when we're making partnerships, it's typically that a company has come to an inflection point in its growth. They have reached a ceiling that they need to break through. And really the only way to break through that is to put some professionalization of the organization around them. And that looks very different for each company. It could be in the sales and marketing. It could be lean manufacturing. It could be ERP systems. Sometimes it's just hiring a CFO. They've never had a CFO or financial system in place. And so, the best partnerships for us are teams and sellers that understand they've gotten to that inflection point, and teams that want a true partner to be able to grow and build, right? We don't know everything. We're never going to know the businesses as well as the people that started them. We're never going to know the industry as somebody that works in it every single day in and day out. But it's truly about saying, okay, we do know businesses at this stage. We do know how to help professionalize them. And if you want a partner to help you do that, that's really where we come into play. It's also really important to us that everybody that we are partnering with has a high level of alignment of interest. So we spend a lot of time making sure that economics are aligned so that we're focused on growing and building a quality business. We're not focused on who's got what economics in a transaction, and that the way that everybody wins is by growing and building the organization. So it's really the stage the company's at. It's the realization that the company has come to. Obviously, there's got to be a macroeconomic trend that makes the reason have a company, a reason to exist. There's got to be good bones. As I said, there's got to be a good culture. But the businesses we're buying aren't perfect. They're not, they haven't gone through. They're not public companies. They're not at that level. But they have a real reason to exist with their customer base. They're important to their customers, and they want to grow and build, and they have a desire to get there, and they want to do the hard work, and they want to hire the people, and they want to make the changes. You do often see businesses that are great family businesses that maybe don't really have a desire to be anything more. And so company A to company B is a lot of evaluation, again, other than the basics that everybody's going to look for in a good business model. It's going to be about the people. It's going to be about what they want for change and what they know they need, and the self-awareness to want a partner to do that. That's when we're making quality partnerships.
Yeah. So when you think about, the trends that are happening in the market right now, one of them being obviously the use of data and technology, and whether it be in multiple types of industries, professional services, but obviously in the world of manufacturing, and the use of data and technology, and changing a business to more of that technology enabled type businesses. And I see it across the landscape with my private equity clients, regardless of industry, right? Of how we can use data and technology to make us better, smarter, quicker than our competition. How do you view those trends? What are the trends you see? And are you guys kind of employing that type of use of data in some of your businesses now?
Yeah, and you're seeing it more and more, even in the industrial old economy space, right? I think a lot of the businesses, again, at the level we're partnering with, they have data. They may not understand the power of that data at the time when we're really partnering, but they know it and they use it more in a gut feel way sometimes than they do in analyzing it. So a lot of what we are doing with them is both internal KPIs, understanding metrics of the business they own, again, making decisions with more data. But then we are spending time to understand, what do you know about your customer that you could give them in a different way that's going to help you, have great stickiness with that customer, that's going to make their, customer's life easier. So you're not just providing a service, but you are providing a service in a way that is all encompassing to something that your customer needs to know. And we're doing more and more of that with our portfolio companies. And sometimes that ends up looking like a platform for a service that gets offered alongside the industrial service business that we bought. Yeah. And that's great, right? It's just but we spend a lot of time at this stage of the company really understanding what they have, and then how we talking to the customer about how we can use that data differently.
Yeah. And then even if you think about, I remember when we first started talking about, you just think even the basic blocking and tackling of sales and marketing, right? And talking to your customer, your portfolio companies about, hey, listen, I know you're doing it this way, but if you did it this way, look what the type of sales you could change, right? And it's always sometimes think a lot of my experience and love to know yours in the middle market is they kind of been doing one thing one way, and it's an entrepreneur, founder led, and been very, very focused on that one path versus, has never really been exposed to some of these other paths. And I think I see that a lot obviously in the middle market, just because they've been successful, but maybe they don't know what the best in class looks like from growing. Yes, you're a successful $100 million business, but how do you get to that next stage, right? It's always different stages of both people and businesses. So, I guess maybe comment a little bit about from a sales and marketing standpoint, from use of data, is there pieces there you're using there now, or like within the portfolio companies from a sales point, I guess how do you view sales and marketing within your portfolio companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think digital sales and marketing, even in the industrial space, is something that people need to focus on and understand how to do. And that is, you're right, a tough sell sometimes for these management teams who are only used to making the sale on the golf course and only really used to doing it one way. What we've done, because obviously it's not just about having the idea, but getting adopted, at the top and throughout the organization. So in the sales and marketing, we've used a lot of collaboration across the portfolio. We have some sales and marketing teams that are much more at the forefront of using data and analytics to do email campaigns and get to their right customer and be in front of the customer. And then some that are more apt to social media and being able to use media to drive more pull demand than push demand. And so we found the collaboration with the sales and marketing across the portfolio is really helpful because they can kind of all sit together and say what's working and not working. And even if it's different, Chase, than what they're used to doing, if they hear success, salespeople love success, right? So if you're hearing that somebody else is having success in another way, it does help kind of feed that adoption and making those connections. So we try to do that both at the CEO level, and then also we've done it throughout Linx at the sales and marketing level, because we think it's really important. There's no one way to, particularly in the pandemic, there's no one way to reach your customer. And I think some collaboration across the portfolio has been really helpful.
When we started search, we are very big on stats. I mean, I actually just finished a search where I think we spoke to 935 people in one search. That's what we talked to. Took 5 months to finish, which normally that is not our normal close time. But I think my client was very happy with the end product because it was a very, very hard search and we had to cover the full market. They all don't go that way. By the way, our typical close time is, I think, it's 104 days. But sometimes you really, if you know the stats and you're very KPI and process driven, I mean, the devil's in the details. And if you're transparent, you know where you're going with it, right?
Yeah. And it goes back to that. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with data and metrics and motivating people, right? We find often in the companies we're partnering with, there aren't reviews, there aren't job descriptions, there aren't KPIs. And so you may have people that love coming to work there, but they don't really know what they need to do to get a bonus or to move up in the organization. And so it really does go back to helping educate the management teams on just starting small, putting some of this in place, starting to develop KPIs. Okay, you don't track it today, but what should you be tracking? Right. And then what do you expect somebody to do? And how are you going to use those metrics? Again, it's not an overnight process, but it's really fun to see when we get towards the end of a portfolio company that's going to sell and is looking back and saying, oh yeah, we have reviews, we have KPIs, we adjust them quarterly, we pay people, our people understand how to move up in the organization. Those businesses are ready to really take off and fly because they've got the metrics and the data and the people in place. And whether that's lean or just using data better from a process and procedure standpoint, it makes a huge difference in these companies.
Yeah, we're seeing that on our side as well. So CFO function, the constantly evolving CFO function. I'd probably say half the phone calls I receive are usually a business say, listen, we're growing at scale, and either our CFO left, or maybe the individual just is not as strong as what we would like. And I think it's constantly evolving into more of an operational type CFO versus just call it pure accounting. I'd love to hear your insight on how the CFO function has evolved, or even how you view CFOs within your portfolio companies.
Sure. Yeah, it really depends on the size and the need, right? Some of our companies really only need that controller or that CFO that's just guts accounting. And a lot of that is maybe at the start of a deal where it's a smaller company that doesn't necessarily have that need. What our best CFOs though can wear either a strategic data hat or they can wear an operational hat.
Okay.
And they are really a true partner to the CEO. We are not looking in that CFO role ultimately when, the company is starting to grow and build, and particularly when we're getting them, past that initial stage into what they need to go on and be sold with. They need a strategic CFO partner. You need somebody who wants to use those KPIs and data, wants to be able to give the CEOs and the team better information about how to run the business. And so when we're having to run searches for CFOs, we are looking for folks that can either put on that data hat, understand how to get the best out of systems and really mine and get operational, fundamental, strategic data out, and or that have worn the COO hat. Sometimes it's a bit of a unicorn to find that perfect COO, CFO combination. But you do see some folks that make that transition quite well. And when you find them, it's they're a true partner member of the management team, absolutely somebody that's needed in the C-suite. They're not just crunching numbers.
Yeah. And I see that a lot, and it's hard, right? I mean, it's because, individuals who come up with finance function obviously typically come out of public accounting, and then, probably we're going to bigger businesses. And then, I'm putting myself in your seat. It's hard thinking about, hey, can this person come down and roll their sleeves up and play middle market ball, right? And understand, okay, listen, I might have to put multiple hats on here in order to be able to get the business over the finish line where we want to grow it to.
You see this in the interviewing phase, right? All the time, but it's got to be that person that has done the public accounting and can kind of say, well, I did it, but it wasn't all I want to do, right? Or I was a controller and I did it, but it wasn't all I want to do. You're really looking for somebody who gets excited by looking at a strategic problem and digging in and using math to help them solve that problem. Right. It's almost, again, going back to the EQ, you got to find that side of them that's driven so that they've got the numbers that they can do, but you want them to be able to use it in a real strategic way. And so got to get to the heart of the person as much as the skill set and background.
Right. And that's when you're coming back to evaluating talent. That's obviously one of the hardest things my clients tell me is evaluating EQ, right? I mean, you can figure out the skill set, typically, after spending an hour with someone, but the EQ piece and understanding how does someone value, can they build relationships quickly, right? Can they come in and affect change without being a bull in a china shop? Those things are so hard, and it's hard to evaluate that. And I can, again, put myself in your shoes, and that's hard. That's just trying to figure out what's the best, how's this person going to react in this type of situation? Those are, I think I don't have a single client, big or small, that is not asking, what's the EQ of these types of EQ of candidates, let's put it that way.
Yeah. And in smaller management teams, it's even more important, right? You're coming in maybe as the first CFO that's ever been in a family or entrepreneur-led business. And so you're right, they have to be able to speak in a way that is going to be respected and understood and not be that bull in a china shop and not just come in and say, I know more than you. And so most of the time, I think you do check the box on the skills, and then you spend most of the time trying to make sure that they're going to be a fit, and interviewing and using third parties and doing all of the testing that you can do out there to try to make sure that you've got the right person. But it's hard, and we don't always all get it right. And the businesses grow and have to change, but you are looking for somebody that can be a partner that the CEO can hear. And that's wildly important to being successful.
Well, last question here. So, as you think about, obviously the fund market we're in right now, coming out of COVID, I think from my point of view, we'd love to hear yours. Deals seem like it's getting hot right now. But what do you think the future lies at Linx Partners over the next 3, 5, 10 years? Where do you guys want to take the business? Just some of your perspective of where you think the business is going from here.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. It is, we'll probably look back, and 2021 will be another record year from a transaction perspective and multiple perspective. There's obviously a lot of capital out there chasing deals. From a Linx perspective, we've been operating with the same playbook for 20 years that we really think works very well. I think there are a number of these lower middle market businesses that have grown up, into the stage that makes sense for us as a partner. And so for us, it's going to be a lot of more of the same. Although I do think some of the work that we're doing right now around ESG, creating an ESG track record, kind of marrying that with the playbook, because it's not just about the culture of the portfolio companies that we're partnering with, but it's about our culture, right? I mean, people want to know that we've done the walk and that we've thought about all of the same things we're asking our CEOs to do. We should be sort of applying to our own firm. And so I think for us, it's really just continued growth and evolution. More funds and more portfolio companies, hopefully. But I do think at the end of the day, it's about that quality partnership at this stage of a company in the industrial space that has a real respect for alignment of interest, for professionalization, for growth, using KPIs, using culture, all the things we talked about today. But really just finding those perfect marriages. And we don't have to be all things to all people. We can't do a gajillion deals anyways. So for us, it's about being choosy and finding the right partners. We look at 400 or 500 deals a year to do one or two. So it's a pretty large funnel process that we're working through. But when you find those partnerships, you know it's somebody who's honestly excited about the next phase of growth and being a partner with us and with Linx. So hopefully it's a lot more of the same and continuing to grow and get better at it.
Yeah. Well, to that end, I very much value our relationship, and thank you very much for your time today. And look forward to seeing what the future holds for you guys at Linx. And thank you again for joining in the Spotlight series this morning.
Absolutely, Chase. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to all of the Kingsley Gate folks for putting this together. It's been a pleasure.